Hello, welcome to J Lowe Artist YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me on this artistic adventure. Today we'll be working with charcoal. Thanks for being here this morning and willing to draw with me. I know it's not always easy, but it's good practice. Your charcoal that we're using today is fairly soft. On the end you'll see it says 4B. It's just a soft charcoal. Pencil charcoal like this is easier to use because then I don't like getting my fingers all messy. But you can use vine charcoal, you can use stick charcoal. I mean, there's lots of different ways you can do charcoal, but this is maybe the cleanest way. Remember, when we're doing our layout, we're going to hold our pencil like this, and we start out with simple shapes. First thing, we have to establish the size we want. So we've got our whole sheet of paper here, and so we want his little head to be up in here somewhere, his ears to be right to the top. You can even make a little mark up there if you want, just close to the edge. Come down maybe an inch at the most, and just make a little mark and say that's where that ear is going to go. And then you want his whole body to kind of fit in there. If you think about his whole body, it's kind of like this jelly bean kind of shape, kidney bean, something like that. Kind of looks like this. Okay, and you want it right down to the bottom. Maybe leave yourself a little bit more space on the bottom than you do on the top. And just a simple shape. His little head is about right in here somewhere. This way we've established the size we want to do it. Make it big. Some of you still are drawing too small. You got to make it big. You can almost have his little backside over here, almost touching that left edge, where we want to keep some more room on the right side, some breathing space, if you will. Just think simple shapes, simple shapes. Here's an ear, kind of comes off here like this. It can be over there somewhere. There's another ear off the side over here somewhere. Just simple shapes. Little arms over here at an angle. There's a little leg that kind of comes up and around here. Over here, kind of hidden by this leaf. It's kind of hard to see, but it's there. It's a little hand sitting out here. You just want to kind of block that in. And if you want to, block in the crook of the limb that he's sitting in. You know, just a little tree limb there. So keep it fairly simple, just all these really simple shapes. And then you look at it and you start adjusting. For example, my head's a little small. I have to make that head just a little bit bigger. Just a little bit. And just about right in the middle of that shape is where his eyes go. Once you're happy with the size of everything is, then you say, okay, about right in the middle of that circle there somewhere, you can take your pencil and kind of move it down until you kind of visually see the middle. You say, oh, his eye's about right in there. This eye is almost smack dab in the middle of everything. Almost. It's off to the left just a little bit. So you just block that in. The other eye is almost on the edge. Is that edge about where we want it? See, that other eye is almost on the edge. Kind of almost a football shape for the eyes. They're not quite round. And his nose area is very oval. Top of the nose is right in between the eyes. And you can mark it off if you want, about right in there. The top of the nose almost touches that right eye. His left eye, our right side. So you can just kind of block that in. Just a little oval shape. You can even put in his little mouth if you want, this little kind of U shape. And of course, we'll adjust this as we go. Right now, we need our point of reference. We need to look at it and just say, okay, what needs to go bigger or smaller or rounder or You know, whatever it is that we need to adjust, let's go ahead and adjust it. If some of these lines are bothering you, you can erase them. Remember, it's very, very superficial. Everything's on the surface with this style of drawing. That back, I've got my back too high, so I've got to adjust that. Whatever you feel like you need to alter or change. Your instincts are probably pretty good. You know, if you look at something, think, wow, it's too big. Remember, don't erase it. I mean, if you look at your problems and you erase them, then you lose your point of reference. So look at your problems, whatever is you want to change. Draw it right, and then erase. There's probably a life lesson there somewhere. Not sure what's going on in that little hand. I can sort of see it. So I'm going to just put in what I can see, and then if I can't see it, I'm not going to draw it. Now, charcoal is much easier to draw larger with charcoal. It can be kind of clunky because it wears out so fast. It kind of gets a little nubbed, so you don't have a really sharp point. You can get some very tight details with charcoal, but you want to use its advantages and disadvantages in the best way you can. So one of the advantages to charcoal is that it's black, so strong contrasts. It smears easily, so you can manipulate it. After a while, it's almost like painting with dry media. That's really cool. So if you're feeling pretty good about your proportions and the things you've got going on here, then we're ready to shift over to the charcoal. Now, the reason we do this with graphite first is because this method of graphite is easily changed, easily erased. But once you get the charcoal in there, it doesn't change as easily. It's a little harder to alter things. And so make sure that your proportions and everything are pretty good. I mean, we can change a little bit from here. But once we start laying in that charcoal, it's harder to erase things. It's harder to change them. So I'm going to shift over to my charcoal now. I'm ready to get some really dark areas. And so I want to pick out the darkest areas I see. And top to bottom, I start out with like these little shapes in the ear. Right in here, there's a little dark shape. And I'm just using these little zigzaggy lines. And I'm thinking fur, so I want to go up in the direction that the fur is flowing. Last time we talked about that feathered line. It's just a little flick with your instrument here, whether it's charcoal or a pen or whatever it is, just a little flick. That's your feathered line. And I'm still drawing like this, because I want that charcoal to be on the surface right now. I want to be able to manipulate it. And there's a little bit of dark under his ear, right there. And so and there's a little white fur that goes over the top. So leave some little areas out. Eventually we'll have that little white fur that's kind of going out in there. If you want to put in some of these other little gray lines, you can, just a few. Not pressing as hard, so it's a little grayer. And as we draw, those lines that we made to begin with will disappear. We'll utilize them, and there's no reason to erase them all. All this stuff up in here, this gray area, I'm going to get that eventually with the cotton swab. And so I'm just concentrating on the darkest shapes. And remember, when you're drawing, you're not drawing an object. You're drawing shapes of dark and light. The object will be there, but in your mind, just think shapes of dark and light. So you kind of dissect this little guy, and you just pick up those dark areas, whatever they are. Use that feathered line. He's very fuzzy, so we want that feathered line. And look at the shapes of the darkness, like this little triangular shape that's right there. And you don't have to draw everything in. The other thing we want to concentrate on, and this is going to be a theme throughout my whole stint as your teacher here, is not drawing lines around edges, dark lines around things. The edges will happen. They take care of themselves, and sometimes it's fun to lose an edge. When we get into ink, which is one of our next things to do after graphite, you'll find that there's a lot of stuff you leave out. We call that subliminal line, where it's implied, but it's not, you don't draw it in. So I'm just drawing in these little shapes of darkness. I'm not using the tip of my instrument here. Just want to keep going with this side of it. Want everything to be very superficial. His nose is very dominant. So I'm going to get that little dark shape, that kind of at the bottom of that little oval area, it's kind of like a little triangle of darkness there. And at this point, if you wanted to flip over to this, you could do that. And charcoal is very forgiving in many ways. There's a little light edge around his eye, so be careful that you don't too much there around the eye. And there's a little shine in his eye. So you just do this little kind of Pac-Man shape or a little C shape. Leave out that little spot of light. So whenever you're doing the eyes, you can't, your left brain wants to just throw in as fast as it can, maybe a symbol, but your right brain's like, no, there's a little shine in there. So you just kind of got to leave that little shine out a little bit. And a lot of that we can get with our cotton swab. We want a little bit of texture in there. So I'm just going to throw in a little bit of texture where some of these little dark areas are in his fur. And that would also help me to figure out where that light and dark is. Just a little texture. These little feathered lines. I'm trying to go in the direction that the fur is flowing, just to give it that fur-like texture. We can do that all over, whether it's, in his face. I mean, the head is our emphasis area. We want to make sure that is taken care of and looks good. The rest of him will come together. A little bit of this feathered line here and there. What'll happen these charcoal pencils, they're hard enough that you can sharpen them in a sharpener. And we may have to come back into this a little bit more. But for right now, that's probably pretty good. And then we're going to move over to our cotton swab, and we're going to just start blending. I'm going to start with some of the darkest areas. You can start with where we started, or in the nose. I oftentimes will work from the face and work out from there. So I just want to start blending that a little bit. That'll pick up some of that charcoal. And now we can start manipulating that charcoal a little bit. You can move it into his nose. You can press a little harder and you'll get more out there. But it's up to you. And sometimes, like where it's really light, you want to just barely touch that with your cotton swab. Just want a little bit there. And if you go too far, let me just take it too far here. In my opinion, that's a little too far. But you can take your kneaded eraser, pinch it down to a little point, and then just come back in and pull a little bit of that out. And you can pull it out like you would be drawing with it. It's almost like drawing with white. So if you go too far, that kneaded eraser will help you. And there are times when I think, oh, I need some more charcoal, and so I'll pull it from one place, like from his ear, maybe put it back over his nose. Or I can just draw on it. I can say, well, I need more charcoal in there, so I'm going to just pull some more of that in there. And so just like with graphite, we're layering in our charcoal to get what we want. It's just kind of a play between, where to add it, where not to add it. And you just kind of layer it in until it's as dark as you want it to be. There's a little light edge across his nose. Just going to pull that back out with my kneaded eraser. If there's any little areas that you want to pull out, you just touch them with your kneaded eraser and it'll pull it right back out. This is why the kneaded eraser is more important than the other kind of eraser that rubs things out. You want to pull it out with your kneaded eraser rather than rub it around. So here now I'm just using my cotton swab, just barely touching it, not too much, to get some of those grays in. I may have to come back into it, add a little bit more. I can soften his eye just a little bit. There's that really light edge around his eye, so I want to leave that out as much as possible. If there's a little wrinkle in there under his eye, you can do that with the cotton swab. It'll make it nice and soft. So just ever so lightly touching these little areas. I remember being in school, my instructors having us draw with charcoal, especially in high school, and I hated it. It was messy, and I like detail. I like getting all these little tiny nuances of detail in there. I felt like you couldn't do that with charcoal. Just because nobody showed me how. I wish that somebody had showed me how to use charcoal in an appropriate way. Experimentation is a good thing. I think all too often we rely more on experimentation for education than on something like this where you're drawing along with you. I think this is the way to go. I wish somebody had done this with me. So, like I say, you can use this charcoal that you pick up off of with your cotton swab to your advantage. And if you need more, you just add more charcoal to it, smear it around. You can use your kneaded eraser to take stuff out. That's called reductive drawing, because you're really drawing with your kneaded eraser. It just is taking it out rather than putting it in. And when you want it really dark, like that tip of his nose is pretty dark, then you just put in your charcoal and leave it. There is a fixative that we'll have to spray on this to keep it from smearing. But once we're done, we can spray it with fixative and it'll be just fine. Now, if you think to yourself, oh, I want to see that neck, use your cotton swab and do the background, a little bit in the background, not much, just a little bit. So you can come in and just softly touch that edge just a little bit. That'll keep it nice and soft, and you'll still see the edge. Come back in with your kneaded eraser and pull some things out. I mean, you can still see that edge ever so lightly, but it looks soft and fuzzy. That's the key. So you just kind of keep layering it in until you're happy with it. Because ultimately, when you're drawing for yourself as much as the audience. I mean, the audience is a bonus. Ultimately, you've got to make yourself happy. There's a great sense of satisfaction that comes from drawing something well. And as an artist, I think sometimes I'm never happy with what I get. And so there's that inspirational dissatisfaction, that idea that I'll always get better, that my next drawing is going to be better. And when I'm drawing it, I think, oh, this is pretty good. And then when I'm done, I go, oh, I don't like that. I want to do another one. I call that inspirational dissatisfaction. I guess that's what keeps us going as artists and always doing something different. It's that need in us to perfect whatever it is that we're doing. So we're just going to spend a little extra time on his face, get that down. Everything else will fall into place quite easily. Got a little short fur on his face. The further away from you the face you get in most animals, the longer the fur gets, until you get down to feet and things like that. But like his ears have some very long line. You could probably little feathered line, you can probably flip that a little bit more, a little longer. And you can also, if you think, well, I'm getting rid of all the little light areas that's in there, you can go back in with your kneaded eraser and just touch it, pull out some of that. And it's not a real heavy touch. I mean, everything here is pretty light. You can, if you want to, at some point, give it a little bit of pressure, but I'm not sure you need it right now. So I'm going to get rid of some of this graphite that I've got in there. Just I don't know if it's really necessary. I drew a little harder than I wanted you to draw so that you could see it a little easier. But with your cotton swab, those ends of the ear that are very soft, you can actually take your cotton swab, and sometimes I like to give it a little twist in my fingers, so I'll turn it like this, and just to give it that softer kind of feel. And you just kind of do that little feathered line in the direction that that hair is going. Look how soft that goes. You can flip it down, you can flip it up, but that'll give it a nice soft edge. Then you can take your kneaded eraser back into it, pull out some light areas. Look how soft that goes. And it's so easy. If we were to use just our pencil and line, that would take forever to do. But here it's just quick. So I can come back in with my kneaded eraser, just pull out some little light, little fluffy hair. Sometimes when you're first drawing, you think, oh, that's dark enough. And then you drew a little around it, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, it's not dark enough. I got to keep going. That's common. And after a while, your technique might change too. You might think, well, start out similar to what Mr. Lowe's doing, and then you'll find something that works for you. You'll find your own voice. You'll find your own style, your own technique. This just gives you a good starting point as far as drawing goes. Hopefully you're getting some nice contrast, some darks, and lights are already there. Your edges should start looking really soft. Nice fuzzy soft textures. And even that fur should start coming through and looking like fur. because of the values that you're laying into it. And use that soft, feathery line to your advantage. One thing I like about the cotton swab is you've always got this other end that is going to be clean for you. So if this one gets too ratty or too dark and you think, oh, I just need a little bit off, I always flip over to the other end. I always like having things in reserve. I've been neglecting that other ear. I guess I better get in there and do that. Now that my cotton swab is really loaded, you can probably do a lot of that with just the cotton swab. Look how soft that ear went. Just so soft. When you're doing fur, hair, anything like this, whether it's animal hair or people hair, don't always go in the same direction, you know, because some hair will flip up, some hair will flip down, so you want to vary it a little bit. And on those ends that are really soft, you can just do a couple little strokes with that cotton swab and get those little ends in there. They'll look nice and soft. And the last things you do before you do your kneaded eraser is just throw in some really dark strokes with that charcoal pencil. You don't need a lot, just a little here and there. Then your kneaded eraser, and hopefully you got it. Just a couple little lights here and there. You got to keep pinching that kneaded eraser down so it stays very tight and thin. You go into his fur, do the same thing. Get pinched down your kneaded eraser till it's nice and tight, and just a couple little strokes of into the fur. That'll give you just a little light, increase that texture, because that texture is really important. And just a few here and there. Once that head is pretty well done like this, then we can move to the body. And that's going to go much faster. The same technique that we used up here, we're going to use in the body. So there's, nothing new that we're going to really go through. Just want to keep concentrating on those darks and lights and the textures. And then we can come back into it and tighten it up a little bit. Make sure that it's exactly like you like it. So again, I'm going to just come back in with my charcoal and hit the darkest areas that I see. Little shadows underneath places. Here in his leg, under his arm, a little bit right in there. across his fur. Any little wrinkles, I'm using that kind of feathered line touch. You kind of flip it, knowing that I'm going to smear all this. That's going to be fairly dark. And this, remember, this way keeps it superficial, so all that will get smooth. As we smooth around with it, it'll be just fine. And you want your edges to be soft too, so. And see how we haven't drawn a line around anything really, and yet your edges come through. And some of those edges, like this little edge along here, is lost. And that's okay. That's actually interesting. Have it be slightly lost. I'm not going to draw his little fingers in. I'm just going to do the little darkness in between the fingers. And then I'm going to just let the tips of the fingers and everything kind of take their own shape. So here's the tree branch. There's some texture in the tree branch there. But I'm just leaving out that little shape where the fingers go, because I'm going to smear that and it's going to look soft and fuzzy. And again, I'm not really sure how that finger looks. It's covered up by that leaf. I don't want to draw the leaf in because it's a little distracting. Look how fast that goes with that side of that pencil. Just quick. And remember, the other reason you do it like this is it keeps your hand up off the page so you don't smear it. If you keep putting your hand on the page, kind of get up off the page. Use that side of your pencil. And if that's hard to do, take a piece of tracing paper or something, lay it down on there, and then put your hand down on it. That's gonna kind of keep it from smearing. Still will smear a little bit. This is so much faster. And this is not an important spot down here. This is not our emphasis. I mean, people notice it, but it's not the biggest deal. The biggest deal is right up here. This is why we do this first. Make sure that it's working out right and everything's good there. Then you can move on. Cotton swab should just be fairly soft. I'm not pressing down very hard. I'm just blending it, just kind of smearing it around. This will soften it. Your edges. And those little lines that we had with our graphite, they're going away. They're disappearing. I almost want to take this little guy home and put him in your pet net. The rest of your stuffed animals. It's so fuzzy. Wasn't that fast? Is that the fastest drawing you've ever done? Should say the nicest, fastest drawing. And once you've loaded that cotton swab, you can draw with it. Like if he's got some little leaves coming out of that tree, you know, little eucalyptus leaves. There's a little leaf right there. There's another one coming out there. I mean, if you want to, you don't have to. But makes it really quick. There's his little fingers, branches, this texture in the bark of the tree there. You also, after a while, you get the technique of when to go against the grain of your pencil, you know, whatever you put in there, when to go with it. When you're doing the bark of the tree, nobody really looks at the bark of the tree, but you do need that texture in there. And so you use it as inspiration more than as you're not doing a portrait of that tree. Nobody cares if it's off a little bit. But you do want to use that as inspiration and get the right texture and the right feeling to it. You just kind of scribble it in. I'm not thrilled with that little branch I put in there, so I'm going to take it out. You can fade things too as they're kind of getting down to the bottom of the page. You just kind of fade it out. You can put your cotton swab in there and just go, I'm going to just leave that kind of soft and fuzzy down there. You can fade that all out. Last but not least, you want to get that texture in his little fur, wherever you want to put it. So I'm just going to go in with the charcoal here. Just do some of these little lines. I can use it sideways here like this, especially in the darkest areas. That's just going to give me that texture. That's one of the elements of art. It's the surface quality, how it feels visually. There's kind of a grain or a pattern that kind of goes with the fur. Just where you can kind of see up into the nap of the fur as he moves, and almost like wrinkles. Again, we've got these leaves that are kind of blocking some of our view here, so we have to just kind of imagine what's going to be going on there. It doesn't really take as much charcoal as you think it might. when you're done here, you're going to look like he's got psoriasis or something, you know, and you're like, oh, he looks kind of funny, but that's okay because we're going to blend it. Then we take our kneaded eraser and pull out some little light areas, and he'll look just fine. Like I say, you work this until you're happy with it. Some people will take it till it's photorealistic. Other people are just happy with the texture and the implied lines and things that go to it. Ultimately, you are one to please. Got about 2 minutes left is all. If you want to get to that point, good place for a signature is kind of down just below his little hand, right down in there somewhere. That's a good one. You could even have it come into the limb. Thanks for drawing with me today, by the way. You guys have been awesome. Hopefully you had fun and you learned some things, and now you're not so afraid of charcoal. You know, part of being creative is getting rid of that fear, whatever it is. And hopefully in doing so, you've learned that art makes life better.